Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. Mississippi will soon have the toughest abortion law in the nation. The House and Senate have approved House Bill 1510. It would ban the medical procedure after 15 weeks of pregnancy. The new restriction comes with two exceptions: when the life of the mother or the life of the fetus is in danger. Rape and incest are not exceptions. Here's some of the debate from when the Senate passed the bill on Tuesday.
This time limitation is unnecessary and it's dangerous. This law, or this change to the law, has twin purposes: to force women to have babies they don't want, and then to stigmatize and undermine the resulting single mothers. It'll be the worst thing that we do here today.
I don't like abortions, period. But when you take a baby and you have to crush the skull and take it apart piece by piece to get it out of a woman's uterus, and you have to catch the remnants in a suction cup and then go to the sink and count them out and make sure you have 2 hands, 2 feet, a skull, a spinal cord, that's just wrong. It's inhumane. What's inhumane is to do these things to a child that's fully developed, that you know the sex of, that can hear the mother's heartbeat.
By a vote of 35 yeas, 14 nays, the bill is passed.
Governor Phil Bryant is expected to sign the abortion bill into law. We caught up with the governor to get his thoughts about it.
Anyone can look at science. I'm always encouraged by those that support global warming, and they refer to scientists. Look at the scientists. Listen to the scientists. If you listen to scientists, most of them will tell you that life begins at conception. So we have a human being 15 weeks old, and people believe that you ought to be able to destroy that life. We don't. So I'm very encouraged about where we're at. I hope at some point Mississippi is free of abortion completely, and I hope it is before I leave office.
Legal experts say the new law could be heading for a legal challenge in the Supreme Court. Mississippi's abortion ban at 15 weeks would be 5 weeks ahead of North Carolina's abortion ban at 20 weeks. Schools in Mississippi will soon be allowed to arm some of their teachers. The Senate amended and passed House Bill 1083 to include a provision to permit schools to decide in the interest of school safety. The bill originally called for authorizing those with enhanced carry permits to bring firearms onto public property. The Senate also added language that prohibits firearms at school sporting events, when law enforcement, that is present at the entrance. Here's some of the debate on the Senate floor on Wednesday.
Parents should be notified if someone on that campus is one of the ones chosen.
Well, let me say this. It may be that when they work with local law enforcement and the school administrators and DPS in doing this, maybe they determine that they want people to know who it is. I think if I were the school, I would not want somebody to know who it was, because I wouldn't want the bad guy coming in and taking out the person who is authorized right away, because they know that's the only person that should have a gun on campus.
No, I'm not saying they name the person, but they name a person in that school.
I see. Yeah, well, they're going to have to say, look, we've agreed to do this. If they don't want to do it, if they think they're going to be taking heat for that, then
Can you hear them say this to the newspaper? The legislature passed this, and we're just going along with the legislature. I know it's optional, but we're just going along with what they did.
Senator Deering, I hope we've got reporters in here right now, and I hope if I've said nothing else today, I want to make it as clear as I can make it. This is not mandatory. There is no requirement. Everybody hear me on that. Is anybody that hasn't heard that? This is not mandatory. There is no requirement that school districts do this. This is up to each local school district to look at their situation and make the determination. I'm not encouraging them to do it. I'm not discouraging them to do that. I'm just saying it's an option that is available for your local school district.
The bill has some good components. There's no question about that. And there are a few of us in here I think naturally would love to support the bill. But I'm concerned about lines 202 and 203 and 204. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me this body is making the argument that if we can make schools safer by restricting enhanced carry permit holders. If that's the argument we're making, we should concede that. We should argue that we're creating a gun-free zone at any school, college or professional athletic event not related to firearms. What does that mean to you? Soccer games? Basketball games? Who knows? The bottom line is we've had this in law where men and women could carry their enhanced carry permit for the last 7 years. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not seen a rash of enhanced carry permit holders create crimes at these ball games. To the contrary, they were there, and they were standing in defense of their Second Amendment rights, and likewise standing for security where security could have stood for themselves. It's just odd that we would take this position or this provision, place it in this bill, and then pass it off as some sort of protective mechanism, when in fact we have removed protections, the very best protections we could have offered, that is the people's right to protect and defend themselves as individuals, and then others if need be. So the problem I've got with the bill is detailed in 202, 203. I have no idea why this body would restrict when we should be expanding such rights.
By a vote of 27 yeas, 18 nays, the bill is passed.
The Senate also added language to the bill to include requirements for firearms training for school employees, an annual shooting test, and a psychological evaluation. The Mississippi Association of Educators says it firmly opposes arming teachers and that protecting students should be up to trained law enforcement. The House passed the Senate's billion-dollar infrastructure plan on Thursday. Senate Bill 3046 is called the Bridge Act. That's an acronym for Building Roads, Improving Development, and Growing the Economy. Half of the money would go to long-term infrastructure projects. The rest would be split among immediate needs, emergency bridge repairs, and city projects. We thought the possibility of having a state lottery was dead this year, but it has been resurrected. Democratic Representative Alice Clark of Jackson amended Senate Bill 2976 on Thursday. The amendment says the State Gaming Commission won't get any state funding unless it implements a lottery to fund roads, schools, and cities. The amended bill passed the House 88-26 and is heading to conference committee. The House and Senate have reached agreement on what to do with the money from the BP settlement from damages related to the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The money would be put in a special fund for the Gulf Coast. A bill that would have spread out the money for projects statewide died. Mississippi will receive $40 million a year for the next 15 years, in addition to the $150 million the state has already received. The fight continues for Mississippians who want to change the state flag. About 24 people rallied on the south steps of the Capitol to protest the current flag. They say the flag, which contains the Confederate battle emblem, is a symbol of hate and oppression. Alvin Barnes of a group called Organizing for Action Mississippi says lawmakers have been dragging their feet on this issue. He says the time is now to create a new flag that represents all people.
I think it's going to take strong grassroots action and support to change. I think it's going to take hearts and minds to change. And I think it's going to take a lot of activism work to change dialogue, conversations, and actually for state legislators to have a debate on the floor of the House with the full House or the full Senate in session and actually talk about the issue. In committees, of course, you have debate, but the full, all the voices of Mississippi aren't being heard in the debate. We can leave it the way it is, but it doesn't have to be the state flag of Mississippi that represents all Mississippi. I don't mind the flag being in the Mississippi History Museum, the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, but it shouldn't be displayed as the symbol of Mississippi, representing all of Mississippi. Okay. I think a more perfect union would be formed. Justice would be given to everyone. Everyone would have equal rights. Everyone would be on the same playing field. There wouldn't be symbols that constantly remind people of their oppression around. So all of the promises outlined in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence would finally be realized.
All measures on the state flag died early in the session. Many of those who support the flag say it's a symbol of heritage, not hate. The Senate honored a Mississippi man this week for his service in World War II. Joseph R. Johnson of Columbus was just 17 years old when he served in the Army under legendary General George Patton. He was on Omaha Beach in Normandy and later went on to the Battle of the Bulge in Germany in December of 1944. His stories about the horrors of war captivated everyone in the Senate chamber. Johnson received 4 Bronze Stars and the French Legion of Honor medal for his service. Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Lucian Smith is the chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, and he is sitting in for Austin this week. Lucian, good to have you back with us. Brandon, thanks for coming, as always. Good to have you both with us on that issue. Let me start with you, Lucian. The governor wants to make Mississippi abortion-free by the end of his term, as he has said. Based on this current bill's progress, does that appear to be a more realistic goal than it ever has been?
It's certainly the direction that they're heading in. Governor Bryant has been a tremendous proponent of pro-life measures. There's really only one pro-life party in the U.S. and in Mississippi, and it's the Republican Party, and the party's continued to lead on those issues. I think the governor and Chairman Gibson and Chairman Curry deserve a tremendous amount of credit for the work that they've done to make Mississippi the safest place in America for an unborn child.
Yeah, well, as far as that goes, we've got members of our party that kind of go across the entire gambit on that issue. But what we saw this week is another exercise in inviting a lawsuit. And, it was asked rhetorically during the report whether there might be a suit. We know there will be. It'll probably be filed by the same parties that filed it last time, and it'll be successful, and the state will spend thousands of dollars defending it. And so we have to ask ourselves to what extent this is really about policy or what extent it's about politics, and I think it's probably the latter. And this time, for some reason, they did not include an exclusion for rape and incest, which is an oddity. I mean, even people who consider themselves to be pro-life will often say that in the event of rape and incest, they think there should be an exclusion. For some reason, the Republican lawmakers decided that's not the case this time. And so I think trying to see who can be harder nosed than Alabama and North Carolina is not really the place where our Mississippi legislature needs to be playing.
And I don't think that's their objective there. I mean, I don't think they're trying to be the most pro-life state for the sake of being the most pro-life state. I think it's about a continued effort to chip away at abortion so we eventually get to the point where we're a state and a country without it. And the only way that we'll move in that direction is with legislation like the one that's moving through the legislature, or that's on the governor's desk now.
Let's talk about guns now and the gun legislation. There have been similar proposals and bills introduced in state legislatures around the country, obviously in response to the tragedy that happened in Parkland, Florida. And what happened there appears to have been changing a lot of people's views on guns in schools in particular. Brandon?
Yeah, I'm in favor of the bill that was written by Governor Bryant when he was then state legislator Bryant in the House of Representatives from Rankin County. And he wrote a bill that said he didn't think we should have guns on campus, even in the event of someone with a concealed carry permit. He was right then. He's wrong about it now, but I like that bill a lot. Look, I looked at my friend Briggs Hobson trying to defend that. I think his effort to include mental health in the bill, his effort to make it non-mandatory was part of the things that came out of that committee. It was a tougher bill earlier in the week. But this is a rough one, and I think that this is a big issue that requires cooler heads to prevail. I mentioned this to Lucian before we came on air. I don't know that Democrats get this one right all the time either, but I do think that we tend to be quite reactionary in this context, and it's just kind of struck me as sort of a reactionary measure, and I wonder if it can be helpful.
Look, it's moving its way through the process. I agree with Brandon. The tendency by both parties to politicize tragedy is not a positive thing in American public life, and I agree there. I do think this is a good common sense piece of legislation. It's working its way through the process. As Senator Hobson said, it's not mandatory. We're not requiring teachers to carry guns, and we shouldn't be requiring that. But I think if you've got a school district that wants to adopt this policy, and you've got individual teachers who want to go through training, who want to go through screening, who would feel safer having a firearm in their classroom that they were trained and understood how to use, I frankly think that makes that classroom a safer place, and I think that's a good thing. And so this will continue to go through the process, and I suspect we'll end up with a good piece of legislation in the end.
Let's move on to politics. While we've got you here, Lucian, as chair of the state Republican Party, we've got a rare convergence of events coming up in November. You've got both of our Senate seats up for election. You've got an open House seat in the district where Greg Harper is stepping down. As chair of the state Republican Party, does that excite you or scare you?
Well, it doesn't scare me. I'll say before I was chairman, I really liked the interesting political years in Mississippi. But no, it doesn't scare me. We're a very conservative state. You've obviously got a very close Republican majority right now in the U.S. Senate. And so I think you're going to see just a sea of folks from out of Mississippi coming down here to try to campaign and get a Democrat across the finish line in November. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Mississippi folks are going to vote for a liberal to go up and support Chuck Schumer's policies in Washington.
That's just like your opinion, man. No, I think we're going to have some opportunity this year, and it's what we've seen in other states. We've seen even a state like Alabama decide that Republicans have probably had their day in the sun. We see a White House that is increasingly chaotic. I mean, as this show is being viewed by Mississippians, there are probably 2 more people who have left working in that place because they don't understand it anymore. We've seen the candidates become increasingly kind of unpredictable. And here in Mississippi, I think all options are on the table. Senator Wicker has a very tough primary in Chris McDaniel. This is going to be a tough fight. They're already sharpening the blades. 4 years ago, we talked about how volatile that race was. This is already at a pretty much fever pitch. I think that issue is ultimately going to be about the state flag. At least that's what one side wants it to be about. So you're going to have Republicans in a primary fighting about what Mississippi state flag should be. And we know the type of reactionary, racist politics that come out of that. And then they're going to suggest that Democrats shouldn't have an opportunity to represent this state in Mississippi. Look, I've had enough of reactionary Republican politics. I think a lot of folks who don't care about politics have too. And we're going to try to have a conversation that brings more folks into the dialogue and hopefully give somebody else a shot.
Look, I think you're certainly going to see the Democrats work very hard this year. You're not going to be able to swing a stick in Jackson without hitting a New York Times reporter or some Brooklyn-based liberal operative that's come down here trying to get a Democrat elected. But the fact of the matter is, it is going to be a very spirited primary, but we have primaries every year. We had them last year in the municipal cycle. We're going to have them next year in the statewide cycle. At the end of the day, it's like a family feud. You know, we're going to disagree. At the end of the day, half of the folks about are going to be disappointed with who won, but they're going to say, we're better off with whomever comes out of that primary than we are with any of the Democrats who come out, because they're going to go to Washington and they're going to vote to make Chuck Schumer the majority leader, which means great judges like Neil Gorsuch aren't going to get confirmed, which means tax reform that's made America more cooperative, put more money in people's paychecks. That's not going to keep on happening. It's going to be turning back this the conservative agenda that's moving through Washington right now.
So a spirited primary ahead for in the Wicker race. The race to fill Thad Cochran's seat will be different because there will be no primaries. It's a nonpartisan race, and it's essentially a free-for-all for whoever wants to run for that seat. How does that change your strategy in making sure a Republican, from your point of view, is in that seat?
Yeah, it's a very different dynamic. You know, the vacancy. Senator Cochran, and then let me first say, I just commend Senator Cochran for a tremendous life in public service. I don't think there's been a bigger force for good in Mississippi in my lifetime than the senator. And so his leaving is certainly a loss. His resignation is effective April 1st. The governor's got, under one reading of the statute, about 10 days, under another reading, a little bit more time to appoint a replacement. And I think people can look back at the governor's appointments in the past and how he's followed up with appointments. He's not, whoever he appoints, he's not going to say, you know, this is a fine guy, y'all think about him. Phil Bryant's going to be all in, and he is the most popular governor in my lifetime. He has got a tremendous political following. He's got a tremendous political operation. And so I think once he makes an appointment, that man or woman is going to have his full support. I suspect you'll have the support of the party. That's a decision for the committee to make. But
and by full support, you mean you believe he'll appoint someone who intends to run for the seat come November, not just a temporary appointee until the special election?
He can do it either way. But my suspicion is that he will appoint someone and say, this is my candidate for the U.S. Senate. I'm going to send him up now, or I'm going to send her up now, and I'm going to work with her or him to make sure that they become the senator on a more full-time basis.
We spoke with Governor Bryant at issue, spoke with him about this race and his intentions, and here's what he said.
I think it will take us some time to just realize the impact of Thad Cochran. He is a legend. There's been 5 men that have been United States Senator in Mississippi since 1942. None of them has made any more of an impact than Thad Cochran has. We all talked about after Katrina, how Thad Cochran stood with Trent Lott and made sure that the funding that was necessary to rebuild the Gulf Coast was obtained from the United States Senate and passed through the House. Without that, the coast would be a barren wasteland after that. So imagine imagine that the funding that he has provided across the state for projects, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's military bases, the military personnel that are here on bases, many of them in large part because of the influence of Senator Thad Cochran. He is a great American, served in the United States Navy. I can't think of anyone that Mississippi could be more proud of than Thad Cochran. We're going to be looking at any number of individuals across the state. There are a lot of fine men and women that could assume that responsibility. They'll never be able to fill easily the legend of Thad Cochran, but we have opportunities now to find someone that will be able to go and serve in the United States Senate with honor and integrity and have an influence there. The senator will be in office until the 1st of April. Then there was a notification process by the United States Senate. So when I am notified by the United States Senate that a vacancy is open, then I will make a decision. I won't have any announcements or decisions made until after April the 1st.
Lucian, we talked last week when Austin was here about Chris McDaniel's intentions, and he has left open the possibility that he would consider leaving the race against Wicker to enter this special election. Do you presume that he is waiting to see who the governor appoints before making that decision?
That would be my assumption, but I don't know that for a fact. I mean, that's a decision he's got to make on his own and looking at all the factors. But I think you've got a lot of people. You've seen some Democrats announce that they're interested in getting in the race. You haven't seen that happen on the Republican side, and I think that's because they're looking to see who the governor is appointing and who the governor supports.
Brendan, where do Democrats have more of an opportunity? Would it be in this special election to replace Senator Cochran, or in a primary and then a general election for Senator Wicker's seat?
I think that's to be determined. I mean, this second race for Senator Cochran's seat is really not shaped up yet. Secretary Mike Espy has announced his intention to run. I think he will be formidable. I mean, you're talking about somebody with a great track record in Congress and somebody who served in the president's cabinets. I mean, this is a very substantial individual who's stepping up. But we have to see kind of what comes next. I don't think there's a dime's worth of difference, politically speaking, among the guys that are currently serving statewide for the Republican Party. So I think Governor Bryant has a real opportunity, without messing things up politically, to appoint one of those women that are serving in statewide office. And as a Democrat, as somebody that typically doesn't root for the Republicans, but would like to see what's best for Mississippi, I think that would be a historic moment, an interesting moment, something that I would be much more interested in than perhaps some of the alternatives, which seem more calculated to who could win a political race. We have talented women who have served the state well and with distinction, and we have two of them now that I think make good options.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good thing for the Republican Party is we've got a very deep bench. We've got seven of the eight statewide elected officials. Two of them are great women, Cindy Hyde-Smith and Lynn Fitch. It's the governor's choice to make, but I think whomever the governor chooses is going to be the person who wins in November. I think every time a Democrat announces that they're thinking about that race, there's going to be this sort of oohing and eyeing about what a tremendous candidate they are. But at the end of the day, I think that's more driven by a desire from the national media to have some sort of horse race down here than there is what Mississippians are actually interested in supporting.
Does the governor consult with you as head of the state Republican Party about who the best fit might be?
We've talked about it, and he knows that what I would like to see the governor pick is somebody who is going to win in November. Beyond that, I think it's the governor's choice who he wants to see go.
Well, in a primary situation, obviously the party gets behind the winner of the primary ultimately, and you don't endorse someone before the primary. Is it different with a nonpartisan election like we'll have for the Cochran seat?
It is. Our bylaws prohibit the committee, the state executive committee, state central committee, from making an endorsement in a primary. It doesn't prohibit individual members of the committee, individual officers from making an endorsement, but the institution of the Republican Party has to stay neutral. That's not true in a special election. It's a nonpartisan race, so the party is going to look at that, and my view, and I think it's most people's view, the Republican Party's job is to elect Republicans. So we'll look at who the governor appoints and what approach he takes to the seat, and if us endorsing, if the party getting engaged, if the party asking for national party support for his choice, we think is helpful, then we'll certainly do that. And I think the full resources of the state and national party will be there.
So let's say that the governor makes his appointment. It's a Republican who he and the state Republicans would like to remain in that seat for the duration. And then another strong Republican decides to get into the race. Do you have any power to dissuade that person from running?
No. Anybody who wants to run, who goes out and gets 1,000 signatures, is welcome on the ballot. I don't think that's going to happen. And you look back, a great example is the appointment of Judge Wilson to the Court of Appeals. Jack is a tremendous intellect, great judge, and I think he would say not a great retail politician, but he was the governor's appointment to the Court of Appeals. The governor went all in for him, cut ads for him, got his political organization out there. I think there are going to be some disappointed people after the governor makes an appointment, because I think everyone who's been elected, who's run, who's thought about it is going to think, gosh, I ought to be the U.S. Senator. But I think they're also going to recognize you're not going to run against Phil Bryant and be successful. If the governor is out there in this last campaign for his choice for Senate, he's ultimately going to be successful, I think, against whomever decides to get in that race.
Brendan, do you feel like you're sitting on the sidelines of something like this, or do you feel like Democrats can make a real play here?
Look, Lucian paints a pretty picture, and if it were down to, if the Republican Party was composed purely of people with Lucian's temperament, then what Lucian just said might be true. But this ain't a family reunion like he just described. You don't say, let's get Uncle Roger out and drain the swamp at a family reunion, or we're not coming back anymore. The Chris McDaniel folks and folks like him are not here to play nice, and they don't care about conventionality. They don't care about getting along, and they're not interested in the Republican Party long term. And so you're going to see other Republicans enter this race, and you're going to see a fight, and that creates opportunity for us.
And we'll be watching all of it. Thank you both for joining us on At Issue. We are out of time. Don't forget, you can watch the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we invite you to join us again next week for another edition.